Some victims stunned and angry. Investigative reporter Scott Friedman has the exclusive. Scott?
Brian and Meredith, the soldiers shot in the Fort Hood attack have not received the same pay or benefits as soldiers attacked at bases overseas. Meanwhile, new documents we've obtained show the accused gunman is getting hundreds of thousands of dollars of your tax money.
I honestly thought that I was going to die in that building.
November 5th, 2009. Major Nadal Hasan opens fire inside the Army Deployment Center at Fort Hood.
Seek shelter immediately.
13 dead, 32 wounded.
You know, when I first got shot,
3 of the bullets hit Army Specialist Logan Burnett, a reservist on active duty headed to Iraq.
blood everywhere, and then the thought of, that's my blood everywhere.
Burnett nearly died. He's had more than a dozen surgeries to remove shrapnel and says post-traumatic stress still keeps him up at night. Now he's fighting a new battle against the Army, and he's stunned by something NBC5 Investigates uncovered in this letter from the Department of Defense.
This is ridiculous.
Burnett says the shooting was like combat.
You take 3 rounds and you lose 5 good friends, and you watch, 7 other people get killed in front of you. Do you have another term that we can classify that as?
But the Army has not classified Burnett's wounds as combat-related, and the Army has declined to label the incident a terrorist attack, even though FBI reports show Hasan was communicating with a member of al-Qaeda, and the government's National Counterterrorism Center lists the incident as a high-fatality terrorist attack. The Army calls it a case of workplace violence.
Sickens me. Absolutely sickens me. Workplace violence. I don't even know if I have the words to say.
Because of that characterization, Burnett and the other victims have not been given combat-related pay, and they're not eligible for Purple Heart retirement and medical benefits given to other soldiers wounded overseas and in the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon. Burnett, his wife Tori, and the families of the other Fort Hood victims miss out on thousands of dollars of additional assistance every year.
They don't need to be treated like this. They don't need to sit and fight every day for this, this benefit or that.
And while the families argue for more help, NBC5 Investigates has learned Major Nadal Hasan has received hundreds of thousands of dollars in military pay since his arrest.
I want to show you something. This is a letter we received from the Army showing how much Major Hasan has been paid since he was arrested.
There have been times when my wife and I cannot afford groceries. We cannot afford gas in our car. Literally times where we ate nothing but ramen noodles for weeks on end. And this makes me sick to my stomach.
Hasan's total pay since the shooting, more than $278,000. The Defense Department confirmed the numbers in response to an NBC5 Freedom of Information Act request. The Army tells us under the Military Code of Justice they cannot suspend Hasan's pay unless he's proven guilty. But more than 3 years later, he's still awaiting trial.
We're giving the defendant, in this case, every benefit of the doubt, but yet we're not giving the benefits to the victims.
Congressman Thomas Rooney is a former prosecutor at Fort Hood. He recently signed a bipartisan letter urging Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel to reclassify the deaths and injuries as combat-related. The letter says the current situation has resulted in an embarrassing lack of care and treatment for the victims and their families.
What happened here is clearly not just workplace violence. What happened here was an attack on our military by a terrorist element, specifically targeting our military, which just so happened to be in the United States of America.
Rooney says he's also willing to consider whether Congress should change the rules so the Army could suspend the pay of soldiers arrested for crimes. If Hasan had been a civilian Defense Department employee, NBC5 has learned the Army could have suspended his pay after just 7 days. Personnel rules for most civilian government workers allow for indefinite suspensions in cases when the agency has reasonable cause to believe that the employee has committed a crime for which a sentence of imprisonment may be imposed. We wanted to ask Pentagon officials about Hasan's pay and about the decision to classify the shooting as workplace violence, but the Army turned down our requests for an interview. The Army's Chief of Media Relations told us the Department of Defense is committed to the integrity of the ongoing court-martial proceedings of Major Nadal Hasan, and for that reason will not further characterize at this time the incident that occurred at Fort Hood on November 5, 2009. Logan Burnett recently retired from the Army. He's moved to Arkansas, living with family to save money.
I learned that nothing's ever going to go the way you want.
Meanwhile, the Burnetts and other Fort Hood victims are now suing the Army for the benefits they believe they've been unfairly denied.
I refuse to continue letting Nadal Hasan win. And I leave the major part out because even though unfortunately he's still being paid better than I am, he doesn't deserve that rank.
Hasan's first lawyer said no bank would take his client's paychecks, but a Fort Hood spokesman tells us that's been resolved, so Hasan or his family can access the money. His new lawyer declined to comment. Brian and Meredith, the Army could get some money back by demanding that Hasan repay the cost of treating his wounds. Of course, a police officer shot him on the day of the attack, but military officials would not tell us if they plan to do that or not.
Eye-opening.
Thanks, Scott.
Ben.